All right, so I want to talk about performance anxiety and just anxiety in general and anxiety related to um, anything that can cause stress in your life. So, anxiety is something that I've dealt with on a fairly regular basis for the last 4 or 5 years. Pretty much since I got diagnosed with Lyme disease, a decent, I've had a lot of problems handling anxiety. So it probably took me about 3 years to sort of figure out what was going on because I didn't really know what anxiety even was, and I couldn't really relate to anybody, and nobody really wanted to acknowledge that that's what was occurring. Um, I guess I lie a little bit because I have been afraid of flying probably since about 2003, and that all goes back to anxiety related problems. So I didn't fly in an airplane from 2008 until 2016. Okay, so I went 8 years flying, and I spent a lot of time researching what was going on with my brain and how I was handling anxiousness and what I was doing to deal with it. And after about a year and a half of doing all this research, I was able to fly to Salt Lake City for the first time. It was the first time I had flown in 8 years, and with so that was about a year and a half ago. And what I think is pretty cool is that now looking back, the last year and a half, I've been able to sort of deal with this anxiety problem and get to the point where I've flown now to Salt Lake City, Portland, Oregon, Eugene, Oregon, Orlando, Malaysia on 5 flights, Tokyo, Ecuador, and London. So I've been pretty much around the world in the last year and a half solely because I learned how to handle my anxiousness properly. And I hope that this helps as far as performance anxiety is concerned. And even so, this past weekend I did a seminar, and prior to the seminar I started to get very, very anxious and nervous and wondering like what's going to happen and how am I going to do this, and am I okay. And first you've got to put in the back of your head that you are going to be okay, and that any of your thoughts that you're having that are negative are completely illogical, um, especially if you're well prepared. And I think that was the biggest thing for me with the seminar is that I knew I was well prepared. I knew that I know I have a lot of knowledge. I know that I have a lot of knowledge that I can share with people and that people will value. And I think that that's what we need to keep in the back of our minds when it comes to performance anxiety is that you are well prepared. You've been doing this and you've been preparing for performance, for months or years or whatever it might be, and that needs to be in the back of your head. But what the first thing that needs to happen is there must be defense mechanisms put into place. So there must be an acknowledgement of when anxiousness is occurring, that you acknowledge that I'm getting stressed. And then when I get stressed, it leads to anxiety and feelings of anxiousness. So that first acknowledgement is in absolutely imperative. And if I can relate it back to the flying, is like when I would get on a plane, I would sit there and I would think I'm gonna die. I'm absolutely gonna die. There's no way I'm gonna survive. I'm not gonna get to see my kids grow up. And that's a terrible thought. It's an absolutely horrible thought. And I very well might die, but it's not logical. Science will show it's not logical that that's going to happen. It's very, very unlikely that you're going to die in an airplane crash. It's very unlikely that that stuff's going to happen. And that needs to be the first step is acknowledging, okay, I'm being stressed, and when I am being stressed, I'm responding with anxious feelings and emotions. So the acknowledgement is key. Then the second step is how can I handle that? So one of the books that I'd read about anxiety for me was they wanted you to have like a rubber band on and flick your rubber band, because what can end up happening is you're distracting your body from anxiousness to like this mild pain. And that did work for me a little bit, but it wasn't great. But it's the idea and the concept is there is that there's some form of physical reaction. Maybe you pinch yourself or do something ridiculous, or you have um, any type of physical thing to teach yourself, like, look, like, what you're feeling is not reality. This, pinching yourself is actually reality, and it's a different situation. But for me, what worked the most and continues to work the best with all this stuff, with especially with performance anxiety, is, coming up with some mantra that you're gonna be okay, that you've done the work, you've prepared properly, and everything that you're feeling is illogical and unreasonable. And if you can convince yourself and sit there and say over and over again, my feelings are illogical. Now that's a negative. You could say it as, I'm prepared. I can do this. I'm ready for this challenge. I'm going to be the best. And you convince yourself, and you come up with a saying, and you have this saying in place. And now what I like to do is I think it's important to go through like a first person, second person, third person. And if you can go through the first person of saying, I can do this, I can compete, I'm the best, I can do this, I can compete, I'm the best. That could be the first step. And if you're still having those feelings, then you can start speaking to yourself in the second person. And in your head you can go, you can do this, you've prepared, you're the best. Or you can do this, you have prepared. You can do this, you have prepared. Something along these lines. It doesn't have to be those exact words. Now that could be the second step, is speaking to yourself in the second person. And one little tweak that you could do is put someone, now it's not just you saying it, put someone in your head that you have the utmost respect for, or somebody that you look up to. And that person, that it could be your parents, it could be your grandparents, it could be somebody who passed away that you really value. Anybody that you have a tremendous value on their opinion, and they're the ones sitting there saying, you can do this, you've done the work, you're prepared, you can make this possible. And that could be a tweak to that second defense mechanism of performance anxiety, of sitting there saying, it's not just I can do this, I'm prepared. It's you can do this, you're prepared, you've done the work. And then the tweak becomes, you put in that powerful person in your mind that's, they're telling you that you can do this because they know you can do this. And then that third step, or the third, adaptation would be talking to yourself in the third person. And for me, it would be, Dane can do this. Dane, Dane can fly. Dane, Dane has illogical thoughts. You are safe. Dane is safe. Dane can fly. Dane is safe. Dane can fly. And you're saying this over and over again. And eventually you're going to get to the point where you've convinced yourself, and you might even look at the situation like, why was I so strung up? There's no difference between today in a performance-based situation and yesterday in a training-based situation. And I think that if you can speak to yourself in the third person, Dane can do this, Dane can fly. That's a great step. But another addition that I also like to do is using a method of seeing yourself as this greater person, as a superhero. And I know this sounds hokey, but I don't give a shit. When you have when you have anxiety problems and issues handling stress, these tweaks can go a long way. So that the next step could be, you're talking to yourself as though you're fucking Batman. Like, I'm sitting here and I'm Batman, and I'm going, but I see myself as Batman while I'm saying, Dane can do this, Dane can win this fight, Dane can do this, Dane can win this fight. And when that happens, and you envision yourself as this superhero type person, whatever it is you want to be. You could be portraying yourself as Captain America. You could portray yourself as Catwoman, or you could portray yourself as a war hero that you've read about in history, or you could portray yourself as Genghis Khan, somebody who's just an absolute animal who could do anything because they controlled their emotions and they controlled their stress properly. So, and then finally, I do think too, this is something I'm going to steal from one of the best shot putters ever, is that he would look at himself, and he was a shorter statured shot putter, but he was one of the best shot putters, and he would see himself as this hulking figure that was 6'10", 7 feet, and people would see, in his mind, he'd be standing there like, I can win this competition, I can be a champion. And he would, instead of being a shorter person, in his mind, he would change that environment to be, I'm huge. I'm this big man. I'm this large man, and I'm going to conquer my competition today. And that's something that you could also do from a competing standpoint, or from a presentation standpoint, or any way that you're dealing with stress, is to make yourself feel bigger than you are. Make yourself feel better. This large person who everybody's looking up to, and everybody's looking at like, wow, this guy's incredible. Let's see him compete, or let's see her compete. Let's see what she can do, and let's see what she has to offer. And if you can put yourself as this bigger person than you really are, but what ends up happening is you buy into yourself. You buy into the work that you've done in the gym, or the work that you've done in the study hall, or the work that you've done throughout your life, and now you're going to share that work with everybody and show everybody what you are capable of doing. So acknowledge that you're starting to feel anxiousness, and acknowledge that there's a stressor. Come up with numerous little defense mechanisms to try and, you know, disconnect your brain from that stress. So a little bit of physical pinching, or have a rubber band on and you're slapping yourself, or anything, you sniff ammonia, whatever, anything that can sort of distract you. And then if that's not working, talk to yourself in the first person. Next step, talk to yourself in the second person. Next step, have somebody in your brain who's more powerful than you, that you look up to, have them talk to you in your brain in second person. Then talk to yourself in third person. Then sit there and look at yourself as though you're some superhero, some freak animal person, that, a historical figure, anybody that you look up to, and look at and use that image, and that image in your brain, and talk to yourself in a positive way. And those are some really simple things that you can use to handle your anxiousness. But there has to be a mechanism put in place before you are in a stressful environment. And if you can put it in place before you're in a stressful environment, that will go a very long way. And another thing that you could do to add in a little bit of meditation. Add in a 1 minute meditative mantra where you just repeat these things over and over again. You say the same thing over and over and over for a minute straight. And even that could be the easiest way to flip the switch in your brain from being anxious to feeling empowered. And that's the key. Feel empowered.